Okay, how's this working? Can you hear me? Sweet. All right, well, welcome. Final day. I can't believe we're here already. My name is Mike Mineta. I'm the VP of Volunteer Advocacy and Training at American Promise. I'm here with Alan LaPolice. He's the director of our coalitions building at American Promise. And we're going to focus on this panel. Actually, it's really more of a workshop. We're going to get into our plan to amend the U.S. Constitution to deal with America's big money problem. And we want this to be engaging, and we want you to walk away from here committed to taking at least one step in this amendment campaign, whatever that might be. If you're here and you're an experienced volunteer and you've been doing this for a while, we still want you to go through this exercise and write down, commit to taking some steps after you go home from here. So we're going to roll up our sleeves, essentially, in this workshop over the next hour. So you can open your packets here. There's 2 worksheets in there. We'll get to that a little bit more in a few minutes, so don't worry too much about that right now. And you've got an explanation of the For Our Freedom Amendment, which we're going to get to in a minute as well. So welcome, and thank you to Represent Us and all the other organizations that have helped to put this on. It's been a pretty awesome 3 days, as it always is when we get together. It always goes by too quickly, I think, but here we are. So we're going to roll up our sleeves a little bit before we hit the road and go home to our respective states. So
one moment before we start,
Alan.
Because it's Friday.
Alan always has something to say.
I always
by the
have
way.
something. Because it's Friday and because you've been active all week and some of you are probably tired and you've got a flight out tonight, and my condolences, but because I want you all to be awake and alert, everybody, on the count of 3, we're all going to say Friday, right? Okay? So 1, 2, 3, Friday! All right, we're all good? Everybody's checked in?
Thank you, Alan. I'm sure that won't be the last time he does something like that. So, in short, what we're trying to do here is we're going to talk about a constitutional solution to restore the people's voice in government. I think it's easy to talk about big money and corruption as the problem, but the heart of the problem is that we've actually lost our representation and our voice in government. So we don't want to lose track of that as we go through this presentation. Quick overview of what we're going to do in this workshop. We're going to talk about the problem, but I know that we've talked about it a lot if you've been to some of the American Promise panels over the last couple days, and even some of the other panels are touching on this issue as well. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the problem. We're going to spend a little bit more time on the constitutional solution, a closer look at our strategy at American Promise, and our strategy and some of the tactics we're using. And then we're going to give plenty of time to do an actual workshop where we stop, and we're going to be walking around and working with you to create that plan, your plan of action for, what are you going to do in the first month? What are you going to do in a 3-month time period? And really just work with you one-on-one to make sure that you're comfortable. And then we want to share some of those ideas. So we don't have all of the answers. We want to leave a lot of room for innovation, and every state is different, every town is different. You might have completely different network, than others. So we want to make sure we leave a little bit of time at the end to just share some of the ideas that people have come up with to go and make this happen, in your states, in your own towns. And then that's it. And then we'll say a couple of quick remarks, and we'll go close it out together. So, quick question. We were going to have a little more interaction with having you text to a number to have a bunch of words come up here. But we decided not to do it just because of the internet's and cell service down here isn't the best. So just to, if anyone wants to throw out a word or raise your hand, how would you describe your experience in one word so far over the last 3 days?
Inspirational.
That's a good word. What else? Inspiring.
Inspiring, inspirational. Did you say hard? Affirmational.
Informational.
Informational, yes. Educational. So, Represent Us and all of the partner orgs have been doing this for many years. There's been a pause due to some circumstances internationally, but does it feel good to get back here? If you've been here before, is it good to feel back, engaged, networking with fellow democracy reformers?
All right, moving on. Thank you. So the United States was created with the guiding principle of being a government of, by, and for the people. So let's just do a show of hands as we go through these different options, right? So do you believe that Congress is representing your needs as an American? How many people would say yes? All right, let the record show 0.
For the record, I'm a billionaire.
How about somewhat? Okay, a couple.
They do pass legislation from time to time.
What about not sure? Okay, couple. Not much?
Oh.
Okay. How about not at all? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, if you answered in those last two, not much or not at all, you're definitely not alone. That is the feeling of a lot of people in this country right now. And this is from Pew Research. They've been doing polling for a very long time. But what this shows is back in the 50s, almost around 70% of the people who lived in this country believed that the government was working for the benefit of all. And now, if you skip ahead to 2018, the last 5 years, that number is down around like 10 to 15 to 17%.
It hit a low of 9 in 2013. 9% of the population felt that the government served their interests. 9.
So those are staggering numbers, actually. So something obviously happened, right, over the last half a century. So just think about that as we go through some of this, right? This is supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people, and you went from having a super majority of the population believing that the government was actually working for them. It's almost hard to even imagine, right, these days, down to this extremely low numbers where we are today. So it's not a secret either, right? I mean, for anyone visual, we're talking about an absolute just tidal wave of unlimited, unchecked money that is allowed to pour into our elections. And every election gets worse and worse now. The numbers are off the charts, actually. And it's dark money, it's foreign money, it's coming from out of state, right? It's just totally out of control. That's really what we're talking about. And there are consequences to this, right? When you allow so much influence from the special interests and the big money over our government, the list goes on, right? And we'll stop actually and talk about that for a minute. What are some of the things that you care about that are not getting solved because of this influence? And healthcare, I think, is one that we can all feel on one level or another. I know this is the one that got me initially into this. I breezed through most of my high school years and younger years, not caring that much about politics. Felt that everything was going pretty good, even though behind the scenes it probably wasn't in the 90s. When I was in high school, it felt like it was. But these days, the healthcare industry, the fact that if I get a disease or something where it's going to require a lot of health insurance and payments, I could potentially lose my home over it. This is happening. I think it's still the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the U.S. right now is people paying their health care bills to try to stay alive. That's insane. That terrifies me. The fact that my friends and family could go through that. So we have to just keep that in mind. That the issue that we're here to talk about today is not necessarily the one that gets people emotionally upset. But it is the root of a lot of these issues that we actually care about, right? It's the foundational issue is the fact that there's so much influence and big money in our politics.
If I can point out something that's obvious that you all know, I love this country. I'm a patriot. I'm a veteran from the United States Army. America's the greatest country on earth. However, America right now has the poorest outcomes in healthcare and the highest costs. America right now has the lowest coverage in broadband and the highest cost. If you were in charge, if you had a voice in your government, none of you in this room would shut the government down, which is going to happen in 24 hours. The reason that these things are happening, the reason that we pay more, the reason that our infrastructure is rated at a D, we used to have the gold standard infrastructure around the world. And the reason that we don't, the reason that we do pay so much for healthcare or broadband or our rural services are declining is because we no longer have a voice in our government. And that has to be fixed before any of those other things could be addressed.
So let's just take a minute to pause. What are some of the issues that you all care about that you feel aren't getting addressed properly because of government dysfunction and corruption in DC? Yeah. Climate? Yeah, that's an obvious one, right? Too much influence from a lot of the big oil companies.
There's no
right down the
influence
line.
over climate policy in this country. Get out of here. I also work for the oil and gas industry.
Anything else? Sure, yeah.
I'm also an NRA Life member. I think things are fine. I hope you know I'm kidding.
And we know you're part of the military-industrial complex.
I'm so part of it.
That would definitely be part of it.
Me and Halliburton.
Yeah. When did you turn into Honest Gil on us? He did.
Proceed.
All right. Okay, sure. Yeah.
I always make this case, and it may be that I like soapboxes, but we have a homeless crisis across the country, not just LA. You've probably seen it. But I argue that our homeless crisis is a policy failure. And it's not just that the policy failed, the policy was designed to fail. And so there are those that are buying up land. There are those that are making affordable housing virtually impossible. There are those that make construction of new affordable housing impossible. And this is all a function of we, the people, have no longer got a voice in our own government. All of these things could be addressed if we, the people, had that voice that we once had. But they're not being addressed. We're failing. But you knew that.
Anything else? Ah, okay. Boy, right on cue. Actually, we're not quite there yet, Marie. So these are just some of the numbers, right? Just to give you a sense of just how runaway this actually has become. In 2008, you can see $5.3 billion. This is only presidential and congressional spending at the federal level. It just continues. I mean, those numbers are just staggering. $5 billion to 15 or more in 2020, and it's just going in the wrong direction. There's absolutely no sign of it slowing. So we need to figure out a way to get these numbers out of back to some place that's can be considered reasonable.
These numbers are presidential, congressional. These are all federal elections. These numbers do not include state elections. And state elections amongst the 50 states equals about, in midterm elections, they're about the same in states. So the 2022 midterm elections, we don't have the number up here. It was $17.7 billion in a midterm election. And in the states, it was $16 billion spent on elections. That money could be used better elsewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is just a quote. Again, I think that sums it up pretty well. This was from a 2020 Maine election, and this is from a former state senator in Maine. And he said it felt like we were 20 feet under snow in an avalanche and no one could hear us. And this is a local politician talking about not even being able to get his own message out, even if he had the money, because it had already been bought up by, in this case, a lot of it was bought by foreign entities, actually, or out-of-state money. And so there were, in this particular race in Maine in 2020, there was just an overwhelming amount of money that came into that election, and the local politicians, even if they wanted to, couldn't buy any airtime, even if they wanted to. So, just to take a minute and talk about how we got here, it wasn't always this bad. Back in the Gilded Age, right, the early 1900s, there was really overt corruption, and in response to that, a lot of states and the federal government did certain campaign finance laws that allowed us to have reasonable limits, and that is one of the reasons why. Just gave the numbers from the 1950s, why so much of our country actually felt the government was working for the benefit of all was because they were actually allowed to, or they weren't as beholden for a stretch of our time. But what's happened, unfortunately, over the last 4 or 5 decades is that the Supreme Court has been misinterpreting the First Amendment to basically say, oh, these huge entities, corporations, unions, can spend unlimited amounts of money in our elections because it's the right of free speech, right? So if you know anything about our founders, the fact that they would have meant that corporations and private entities could have unlimited power and influence in the First Amendment is totally absurd, right? They didn't even allow corporations to exist for more than 20 years. They had to go back and prove they were doing public good. So the bottom line here is that the Supreme Court has actually gotten it wrong, and it's going to be up to us to make sure that they know that, right? Like, no, you've gotten it wrong. We've done it 8 times before. We've corrected the Supreme Court in our history. So we really feel we're at another moment where this is where we need to step in and correct the Supreme Court. So did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, you can take that. This is an interactive part, so I want to ask you, you're all here at this wonderful summit, and we're having a great time in a great city, and everybody's got ideas on electoral reform, democracy reform, engagement with voters, all these great ideas. So I want to ask you, this audience here, this panel of experts, what do you recommend to solve some of the problems we have with representation, or lack thereof? So suggestions from the audience. Sir. Oh, keep going. I can hear you.
That case is the case, state of Nevada versus Kerrigan. And if you read it, it basically says that if a state passes a statute that says you cannot vote if you have a conflict, then you may not vote. And the Supreme Court has upheld that. And the other thing that it also says is a contribution creates a conflict, which means if I give you money to help you get elected, and the state has the proper statute on the books, and I come in and ask you for a favor, you cannot deliver.
Is there an enforcement mechanism?
The enforcement mechanism is you can make it a felony.
So I like that. The direct-to-candidate contribution, if you exceed a certain limit or if you ask for a favor, which is what they call quid pro quo, it's a felony, and you could go to jail. When's the last time you saw a politician go to jail? Menendez right now has a conflict of interest, won't step down. So I want to make a quick distinction. No state could set a statute or a resolution or a policy or any kind of new law that would stop independent expenditures because there's no mechanism to stop them. So if I'm a billionaire, which I am, and I went in and I liked you and I wanted you to win, and one of my tactics was to just destroy your opponent, then I can put money into a super PAC, a 501c3 to a C4 I can move the money around anonymously. I don't live in your state, but I can move the money in there. No state law prevents me from doing that. And then I go buy up a bunch of airtime, or I send a bunch of mailers. I can send the mailers from New York, it doesn't matter. But there's no law that your state could pass that would stop me from doing that because the Supreme Court said that I have the right. Because that money, that's spending, well, that's my free speech. And you say, well, I want to know who you are. And I say, I don't have to tell you. So the Supreme Court's decisions have made it so that you could set all kinds of reasonable guardrails within your state, but because money is speech and it can flow across state lines, and because there is no prosecution for me doing that, I can do it without any penalty at all. I can't give it to you, the candidate, but I can spend it. I can spend it. So anybody else have another idea? Sir? Oh, you're taking a picture. No, go ahead. Well, I'm going to cut to the chase. I love all of the reforms that are here. I love all of the organizations that we partner with. I think these are all part of the toolkit that we have to keep. I love RCV. And I think, well, let me put it to you this way. I believe that the corrosive influence of money on politics and on politicians and on the process itself is a cancer. I think it is a cancer in the body politic. Now, I look at the other reforms such as RCV. I like it, and I think RCV is a great form of chemo. You know, it's going to help. I look at open primaries, and I see open primaries as really choosing a healthy diet, you know, taking in the good and making sure that you're improving what you eat, what you take in. And I see independent redistricting. I love independent redistricting because, as Arnold Schwarzenegger says, politicians shouldn't choose their voters. Voters should choose their politicians. I see independent redistricting across the nation as choosing a healthy lifestyle. I see all of these things as being excellent tools in the toolkit, but the money's still there. And so I see this amendment, I see this as taking the cancer out. I see this as excision of the cancer that is in the body politic. And until you can actually cut out all this dark money, all of this, what I consider illegal spending, everything else is good, but it's not going to cure the body politic. It's not going to get us where we need to go. So until we can actually cut this out, I think that we're putting bandages on a wound that's going to continue to bleed. That's my opinion. So that's why Mike and I are here to introduce how to do it.
Okay, here we go. Moving on. And the fun part, of course, the constitutional solution. The For Our Freedom Amendment, you might have heard us talk about that at some of the American Promise panels throughout the last few days. But bottom line, the For Our Freedom Amendment will restore the power of Americans to regulate election spending so that we can protect our freedom, have our voices heard, and participate as equal citizens in our government. And it's actually in all of your packets, so I'm not going to read all of this, but you can check it out. The operative part is really in Section 2. That is, nothing in the Constitution shall be construed to forbid Congress or the states within their respective jurisdictions from reasonably regulating and limiting contributions in spending in campaigns, elections, or ballot measures. So it's an extremely common sense, logical amendment that's nearly impossible to argue with. I've had a lot of conversations over the years, the last 10 years, with legislators from, Hawaii to Missouri, and this is really a concept that they all seem to agree on. And that's what you need when you're talking about amending the Constitution. It has to be something that a very high majority of us agree on, left, right, middle, and that's what we're going for here.
You all know that the vast majority of you in the room agree with us. And the thing that is brilliant about the language of the For Our Freedom Amendment, there are two things that are brilliant about it. This is non-prescriptive. This does not say what thou shalt do. It says what thou shalt not do. It prevents the government. It says that the government or the Supreme Court or any of these things, they cannot stop a state or federal legislature from setting reasonable limits. So we're not prescribing how the reform happens. We're saying that it can happen, and we're making it legal for it to happen. And another piece that's brilliant about this is that a constitutional amendment is a moonshot, right? It's 2/3 of a dysfunctional Congress. What's that? 290 House members. Get them to agree that much on anything, or 66 senators. Oh my goodness. So the language in this is very favorable to politicians of both sides of the aisle. When I introduce this, when I discuss this with members in state legislatures, Republican legislatures, when I talk to federal legislators, Republican federal legislators, and when I bring up the fact that this restores the rights to states, this is the concept of federalism. This is using the 10th Amendment to say, elections should never have been decided by a judicial system. These should be decided through legislatures, federal legislature, federal elections, state legislatures, state elections. So this is bipartisan. This has the ability to win. The only thing that it needs is the mass participation of you, the electorate, to let they, the elected, know that you want it.
All right, thank you, Alan. Well said. And, when you're talking about amending the Constitution, the one thing you absolutely need to be successful is overwhelming public support. So the polls are consistent. It's 75% or even higher, actually. I've seen some more recent ones that are even higher than this, but it's a super majority of Americans. And it really depends on how you word the question sometimes, too. But all of us want this issue dealt with. I think it was said yesterday, but even politicians, like people in Congress, don't want to go across the street and spend, up to 70% of their time begging for money. So this is just one of those issues that we can all sort of come together, unite on, and amend our Constitution, right? This is when we should be coming together to amend our Constitution, when you have really, really high numbers, public support, this high. And then, Alan, you want to take this one?
Well, again, this is the idea that most people in this room who are, when was the last constitutional amendment? The 27th Amendment was passed in 1989? 92. So some of you may recall that, many of you may not. You may not realize that the Constitution has been amended in the past 100 years 7 times. Some of you may or may not know that the Constitution has fixed bad Supreme Court decisions 7 times. The Constitution was built to be amended. It was written so that it could evolve with the society. I love the idea that it's a living document. I love some of the originalist interpretation, but it was built to be amended. It has been amended 27 times. And when it was amended because the public needed it. The Bill of Rights. People needed to know the government wasn't going to take over their livelihoods. Bill of Rights. It said what the government cannot do and what the people have the right for. Civil War amendments. Dred Scott had determined that black people were not citizens. They could not vote because they could never be naturalized. They couldn't participate fully. So we had a sequence of constitutional amendments brought on by the people and a president who was very open-minded. The progressive era, the Gilded Age forced it, and the people were calling for something. They needed some change to the huge division, the economic divide that was created. And then the most recent was the 60s and 70s, plus the one in 92. But this was the Civil Rights era. This is the days of Jim Crow. This is where, again, the public got together and they marched and they registered voters and they said, no, we need some more amendments. And all of these things came because people wanted them. We believe firmly that we are in the middle or the very beginning of that next great amendment era. And I think that the First Amendment that would allow all the rest is the For Our Freedom Amendment.
All right, thanks, Alan. So then the question, of course, is if we're going to amend the Constitution, how do we do it, right? How do we actually build enough power to amend the U.S. Constitution? So we're going to take a closer look at what we're doing around the country right now. And the good news is that we're not starting from scratch here, okay? This is already happening. 22 states have already called for an amendment to deal with big money in politics. 22 states. And countless towns, which Alan is actually going to talk more specifically about in a minute. But these are state resolutions, mostly state resolutions, with the exception, I think, of 5 ballot initiatives, which is through the citizens, not through the state legislature. But it's essentially a state will pass a resolution through their both chambers, in most cases, unless you're Nebraska, saying that the state of Colorado is demanding an amendment, urging their congressional delegation to propose an amendment out to the states for ratification. So what we're doing is we need to continue to build on this momentum that we already have, right? So 22, we want to get that number up to 38, ideally, the number you need to ratify. But really, there's no reason we shouldn't get to 50 on that, right? So some of the things we're doing, we're meeting with elected officials at all levels of government. And that's where these packets come in here. This is all the way down to city councils, county boards, state legislators, and federal legislators. As a citizen of your town and your state, you can meet and should meet with all of these elected officials to talk to them about this issue. And actually, I'll pause there. Do you want to talk about Wisconsin real quick? Because
yeah, before I do that,
local resolutions is part of what we want all of you to work on in a minute. We're going to give you 2 options.
So we have a really strong 2-prong approach, but before I get to the 2-prong approach, that I'll reveal very quickly. Before we lose anybody else and before anybody gets too tired, on the count of 3, can you all say Friday? So 1, 2, 3. Friday. Now, on the count of 3, can you say amend? 1, 2, 3.
Amen.
Right. This is the right crowd for that. So America Promise is taking 2 approaches. We do know that we have to have ratification amongst 3/4 of the states. So rather than be left blindsided in the states, we are working actively in many, many states. We have chapters across the country. I think we have active participants in about 45 states. We are actively working with language either being proposed in committee or being prime sponsors are being picked right now. So we're very close to making the 23rd state out of either Wisconsin, or it could be Pennsylvania, the 23rd Commonwealth. Maine has got a ballot measure that's going to restore it's going to remind the delegation that this is something that the people of Maine have voted for in the past. So we're also working in Arizona. The other part is that we are actively working in Congress. By working in the states, we get access to their delegation, their federal legislators, and we can work with them. We've met with many of the Wisconsin delegation. So
local resolutions, why are they important?
Wisconsin is incredible. It's a case study in citizen action because not just our group, but there's other groups in Wisconsin that have already gone out and gotten local resolutions in cities, towns, villages, and municipalities. So there are over 170 communities in Wisconsin that have already supported by resolution or referendum some version of the For Our Freedom Amendment. 170. 80% of the population of Wisconsin lives in a municipality that has voted for the amendment. So if 80% of the people want it, and we go to Madison, we should be able to get them to go to their federal delegation. That's how we win. It's because citizen action.
Yeah, that's right. And those resolutions we've found can be extremely helpful in a meeting with a legislator, right? So you go meet with your state representative or member of Congress, and to be able to say 170 towns in this state have already passed resolutions saying they support this amendment, it makes that meeting a lot easier, right? So that's really what we want a lot of you to consider doing, going back to your town and finding out who your city councils are, starting at that local level and getting them to pass a resolution in support of the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment. And we do have, templates for you. You don't have to worry about that stuff. But today, what we're talking about is just taking like the first steps of what that would look like in your town. And then community outreach, another really big part of this. So this is our team actually in Minnesota. Vicki Barnes over here on the left, one of our all-star volunteers. I don't know if she's here today in this room, but she's walking around. But just getting out there, right? Going to county fairs, talking to people. Amy right here also just did that for the first time in Wisconsin recently, right? This summer, and with Alan, that's right. So this is also a big part of our strategy, is just bringing more people in, right? Because a lot of people are frustrated about this issue, but they don't know that there's a constitutional solution that people are starting to rally around all over the country. So we've got to tell them. And then, as Alan mentioned, we're doing ballot initiatives. We've got a really big one going in Maine right now. Chris Kerr right over here, helping to lead that campaign. And you can't do a citizen initiative the way they are in Maine in every state. So that's something that we would strategize with you about, whether you can do it in your state or not. And then, of course, the business community. A really big part of our strategy is bringing business leaders in, going to Rotary clubs, giving presentations to them, going to local chambers of commerce. We have found that they can open doors. So Dave Black right here on the right is the former president of the Harrisburg Chamber of Commerce. And a lot of connections in the legislature. We need a meeting with even a member of Congress. He can usually get it within like 10 minutes. So we highly encourage people to use the business network in your state, start building it. And just take a quick second before we break off and do the workshop of what this is actually going to feel like, right? There's a lot of amazing reforms happening here. We're trying to do something big, right? We're trying to amend the U.S. Constitution. And we're trying to do it in the next 3 years. We actually have a deadline. We gave ourselves a deadline of July 4th, 2026, which would be the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding. So we have a lot of work to do in a short period of time. And it's going to be just an amazing celebration. We can say we amended the Constitution. There will be plenty of work to do after that, but it's something we're really going to be able to celebrate together.
Anybody that gets involved joins in the ranks of Hamilton and Madison. Can't beat that, right?
There you go.
Before we go to the next step, which we're going to start doing this, on the count of three, everybody say Friday. 1, 2, 3. Friday. On the count of three, everybody say amend. 1, 2, 3. Amen. And now on the count of three, everybody say for our freedom. 1, 2, 3.
For our freedom.
All right, let's get to the workshop.
So yeah, look, just to quick, you can submit your workshop to me. That's my email right there. Take a picture of it, and we will make sure to follow up with you on to make sure you have enough guidance and support to actually get it to be successful, right? So what we want you to do, and you can work with other people, we're going to be walking around, is just commit to doing like 1 or 2 simple things. You can fill out the whole thing. You can do your 3-month, 6-month, year timeline if you want, but we really want to encourage you to come along on this journey with us, even if it's just a small step. Even if, hey, I'm not really comfortable to volunteer yet, I'm going to do a little more research. Just make that your plan for the next month or so, is to do a little more research on our website. And then you can always, we would love everyone to sign in. Chris is going to be going around with that just to let us know that you were here so that we can follow up with you from this workshop. So we're just going to take about 10 minutes, just start writing some stuff out. We'll be walking around, and then we're going to come back for the last 10 minutes and just share some of your ideas, because again, this can be innovative. Like, you might know someone in a chamber of commerce, right? So if you do, maybe you want to go have a meeting and some coffee with that person before you meet and start contacting all of that members of that chamber, right, or that city council. So,
Can you explain the difference real quick?
yes, please.
Okay, so in your folders, you've got these 2 documents. Just choose want, you can look at both, and you don't have to do it right now, but we did give you a pen, and we're going to give you some time. One of them is blue, and it's a candidate pledge. So one of the great instruments that we have is getting a candidate on record. In the last presidential cycle, I believe that we got almost every single presidential candidate, at least in one side, to sign our candidate pledge.
Bill
So-
Weld signed too.
What's that?
Bill Weld
And Bill
signed
Weld.
too.
So one of he was Green or Independent? What was
No,
Bill?
he was a Republican.
Oh, there we go, Bill Weld. So this is the candidate pledge. It's a great tool. And if you do reach out to one of your a candidate that you know, local, state, or federal, and you reach out and say, hey, where do you fall on this money in politics thing? And if they say, well, I'm with you, get them to sign the candidate pledge, and we have a whole instrument that they can submit a picture, a statement, and then we can leverage that by putting their picture on our website saying, hey, Bill Weld supports the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment. So this is one side. Mike is giving you a 6-month plan of how you're going to attack multiple candidates in multiple offices, multiple races. So take a look at this.
Not physically attack, of course.
You're not going to physically attack anybody unless they have it coming.
He said attack.
On the red side, I'm just kidding. Please don't attack politicians. The red one is pass a local resolution. Now we have resources on our website. You can also reach out to one of us, and we can send you basically a resolution in a box. And what it is, it's got all the steps. It's got draft language. It's got who you meet with. It's got the process for how do you get before the right committee, how do you get read, how do you get amended, and then how do you get passage. So we can give you those things. But first, figure out what you want to do. Is it going to be a town council? Is it going to be a county board of supervisors? We just passed in the Brown County Board of Supervisors an amendment resolution over here. Thank you, Megan. 92%. Brown County is Green Bay. Brown County is not a bastion of liberal democracy. And they passed with 90% and one abstention. 90% of the county board said, yes, we support this. So figure out, what do you want to go after? A city council, a county board, state, legislature? This is the worksheet for that.
Yeah, and then just last thing on that is just remember that amending the Constitution can sound and feel, I think, a little overwhelming. But we have to remember that one person cannot and should not be able to amend our Constitution. It really is very local, right? So that's why we wanted to focus on this and just have you make a couple steps on a very local level. Talk to elected officials, even in your city council as a first step, because amending the Constitution is actually local and simple when you look at it that way at the end of the day. So let's take a few minutes now. We'll be walking around.
Do you all feel it's amendable? Not trying to rush anyone, but we are going to wrap up soon. There is a 12:30 plenary that I'm sure that you all want to get to. That should be a good one. Do finish some part of your worksheet, and on the bottom of each worksheet, there's an email address. Please, if nothing else, just shoot a friendly email to Mike over here and say, hey, Mike, I've got your worksheet. I'm working on it. If there's ever anything I need, I'll give you a call. So reach out to us via the email on the bottom. My business cards are going to be here, so anybody, especially if you're in Wisconsin or Alaska, grab a business card and then wrap up what you're doing, and then Mike and I have a few more closing words and maybe 1 or 2 more questions from you.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to, I'm Marie Henselder Kimmel. I'm a leader, state leader from New Jersey. For any of you who are considering candidate pledges, for local resolutions too, but especially candidate pledges, and if you haven't done a lot of cross-partisan work, this will actually build your confidence in the strength of our democracy. Because sending out messages to candidates from the opposite party, and we have messages that are tuned in to each party that you can send out by email. And when you get a response and you set a conversation with that candidate, you'll be amazed. I'm not from the MAGA side of the universe, but I spoke to several MAGA candidates last year that I was amazed we had a really good conversation, and they signed on they signed on in the candidate pledge. So now they didn't win their primaries, but we got the idea out there to them. So this this is really important. It will help you. It actually helps heal your heart and know that we can do this, but also it's really good for the whole process of getting this amendment done. So if you're considering candidate pledges, which we'll really focus on next year, just know that yes, it's a big ask. It's a little bit scary, but it's really worth it.
You want to plug your workshop? You want to plug your workshop?
It's apart from this. We'll send that out.
Does anyone have any questions before we kind of wrap up the ideas and send you out into the big, scary world? Wow, you've got everything you need. Yes.
So is the ultimate goal, I went to a panel like Citizens United yesterday, and you know how they were explaining it's basically a gigantic money laundering operation. So-
Billions of dollars. Yes.
But I think it's the ultimate goal to also, like, let's say you get the amendment passed, is like, American Promise 2.0, creating policy on restrictions of campaign finance, state by state or nationally, or what does that look like?
I can't speak. Yeah, while you're coming up.
We have our executive director here, so if you want to take what would happen after the amendment, is there any?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. We get it a lot, and quite honestly, one of the values of the way that we're doing this work is that we truly want each state to figure out what works for them. I don't really see us ever taking like a particularly prescriptive role and saying you should do this. Now, we may take a role in helping to mobilize and empower people within their state to have the effective advocacy strategies for whatever policy they believe in. But part of the reason we've been successful in this way is that we are very policy agnostic. Like, we believe people in their local communities in their states can figure out what works best for their own community.
There's lots of great ideas out there. Like I said, ranked choice voting is one, open primaries, all these things. Democracy dollars, some of you may like the idea of subsidizing or paying entirely for the election process. If you look at it from an economic standpoint, it might be a better investment to just pay for it through public dollars and get better outcomes. But we do not set those policy ideas. We are able to talk with the most extreme MAGA candidates and the most extreme MAGA senators because we are not specifically policy driven. This is the process. We're changing the process. And honestly, we're mostly just restoring it to what it was about 15 years ago. We're trying to restore to the state to set those reasonable guardrails that they used to have. And we don't talk too much about Citizens United because it was a sequence of Supreme Court decisions, but when Citizens United did pass, there was 24 states that had reasonable campaign finance policies on the books. All of them wiped clean. They were gone. How do you justify that? How do you say that it was actually only 5 unelected Supreme Court justices? What? Yeah. Amendment now. So on 3, everybody say Friday. 1, 2, 3. Friday. On 3, everybody say amend. 1, 2, 3. Amen. And now for our freedom. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so what ideas do you have? We just got a few minutes left here before and actually before that, Marie reminded me to remind you, always check our website. You can go to the events tab. There are trainings that are going to be coming up for these specific things that we're talking about. Marie actually runs our writing team, and they've been phenomenal about getting letters to the editor published all over the country. So if that is an avenue you want to pursue, yeah. That's right, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And so just make sure you're always checking our website. Go to the events tab. You can sign up for our trainings there, and we have plenty of resources for you. So with that said, though, let's just share a little bit. What ideas did anyone come up with that you might take for a first step? Do we have any ideas?
Who's excited?
Here we go, right here.
When you talk to your locals, ask them what other organizations they pay attention to, and then say, "Can I talk to them also?" And get their word. That was
great. Great advice. Yep. Just every time you make contacts and you're reaching out to people, make sure you're asking them what networks they're already a part of. Rotary clubs, chambers. That is exactly how we're going to do this.
If I can, one quick second, in Wisconsin, they proved that. Rotary doesn't take a political side, ever. And yet, when they pitched this as civic engagement, they were able to get it through committee and out to the entire, membership of the Rotary Club. And then they were able to take that out to the public, and they had a public presentation in Green Bay, and a ton of people showed up. Rotary did that because it was civic engagement. It wasn't politics. It's making politics civic again.
Great point. Okay, anything else? Any ideas, steps, innovations? Yeah?
I have to confess I'm a newbie, and
Okay.
you've raised my level of consciousness, and I'm a target audience for what you need to attract, so I'm very attracted to it. But yesterday I went to the University of Southern California session on the media, and I was just thinking, just little vignette stories that I've heard here, if they could be amplified, if you haven't already thought about turning it into some sort of ongoing movie, Netflix series. Are you already up there? Are you already thinking about that?
I'll pitch 2 quick books. Jeff Clements is the CEO and founder of American Promise. He wrote a book called Corporations Are Not People, and Money is Not Free Speech. If you can find it on Amazon, if that's where you get your books, I'd rather you go to a local bookstore. Jeff Clements, Corporations Are Not People. And there may be more down the road, but we are doing our best to tell our stories, and if you know somebody at Netflix, have them give me a call.
Great point, though. Okay, anything else?
Corporations are not people. If you type in Jeff Clements, you'll find it. But corporations are not people, and then the subtitle is Money is Not Free Speech. It's literally, he wrote the book on what Citizens United, the history of how we got to Citizens United and McCutcheon and the others, and then what the fallout has been. And it points out eloquently that the members of the Supreme Court that did decide that money was free speech, they also said money should also be transparent. They said that. Over time, it just kind of turned into this.
Okay, maybe time for one more if we've got it. Anyone else? Any ideas? Okay.
Are we going to be able to get some of these slides? I like the one.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I encourage you. So send me an email first of all. Like it's on the back of all these sheets. It's just MikeM@AmericanPromise.net. We're going to follow up with you anyway if you sign that sheet. And we've got all these resources for you. We will offer you the opportunity to learn how to give this presentation because it's not hard, and teach you and make sure that you're comfortable, with these slides and let you go out into your communities and spread the word. So thank you. It's a great question.
If you give us your email, you can take some of my money.
So we'll wrap up. Thank you, everyone, and we look forward to being in touch with you. Thank you.
We'll send the slides around if you added your name to this. We'll follow up about this specific workshop with follow-up content.
I usually have to I have to read these, and some of the handwriting, you're like the greatest doctor, but the worst penmanship.